Good morning. It is September 12th, 2012. This is Jason Horak reporting on the Dodge Daytona electric vehicle. Got some interesting news yesterday where apparently the car is going to ship on Friday the 14th. So 2 days from now, the car leaves for Missouri. I'm not really sure exactly what time of day that will happen. It may be first thing in the morning, it may be late at night, who knows. But either way, the car has to be ready just in case they show up first thing in the morning on Friday. So, why is the car in little pieces, you may ask? Well, as it turns out, I got a call from, or I got an email actually, from ultrarev.com, which is where I bought the SPEC pressure plate and clutch, as well as the SPEC flywheel, technically. And they let me know that the SPEC clutch disc, theoretically with the correct splines in the center, has shipped and is actually expected to arrive today. So it's on a truck for delivery today, according to the tracking information. So it's quite possible that the SPEC disc will show up and then we can get that installed. However, I had to take everything apart anyway, even if that wasn't going to happen, because the SACHS disc and pressure plate was not releasing. It was not disengaging when I pressed my foot on the clutch pedal. The theory was, my kind of off-the-wall theory, was that because the little spring fingers, these guys, are a little bit, there's like a bigger diameter on that one than on the original disc or on the SPEC disc, that maybe the throwout bearing was actually going in between those fingers. So this is the throwout bearing that came with the SPEC disc, and as you can tell, it's slightly smaller in diameter than the SACHS disc, just a kind of a different design. So I'll try to hold this up here without dropping everything, but there we go. So that is the difference. It's probably, what, a quarter of an inch on each side, so a half an inch difference in diameter. Didn't notice that before, and so I ended up putting this disc, or this pressure plate in with the original throwout bearing. However, if we look at it, we can see that actually that should work okay. It's going to hit all those fingers and not go through, as far as I can tell. So that probably wasn't the problem. I got to looking at how this pressure plate was mounted on a flywheel, and I think that there's these little pins, these little holes that go on the alignment pins of the flywheel, and for some reason on the SACHS pressure plate it doesn't appear to be quite the same diameter as on the SPEC pressure plate, because this one slips on easily onto the SPEC flywheel, but the SACHS one does not. And so it was getting bound up on the alignment pins and not actually compressing all the way. You can probably tell from looking closely at an earlier video that it wasn't touching this surface all the way around. So I think just that little bit of clearance was actually causing the problem of why the clutch wasn't disengaging properly. That's my theory anyway. And as I went in and took off this throwout bearing from the transmission, I noticed that it wasn't holding on to the fork in there very well. Basically, there's these little springy type of things that go around basically it looks like a fork in the transmission, and they call it the clutch fork, I believe. And it wasn't mounted on there very well. When I pushed the clutch pedal in and out, I could see that this was sort of twisting and just not holding very like as it should. So anyway, I'm going to be putting in the SPEC throwout bearing, or the SACHS throwout bearing, which has kind of a different, they're much smaller little spring things to hold on the back. Very different designs, but it all kind of depends on which pressure plate I'm going to use. So my thought is to actually use the SPEC pressure plate with the SPEC throwout bearing, regardless of what happens with the whole clutch disc situation. I can use the SACHS clutch disc if the SPEC clutch disc that shows up ends up not actually fitting my transmission, or if there's any problems at all with that, or if it doesn't show up. The tracking number says that it's on the truck to be delivered, but at this point in the game I'm so close to shipping that I'm terrified that it's not going to show up in time. So anyway, that's kind of where we're sitting this morning, with the car all in little pieces and nothing going on. So let me just take a quick look here at the transmission mechanism. So when you press your foot on the clutch, it moves, there's lots of cables in the way, this lever up and down, which moves these little forks in and out that push that throwout bearing in. That's kind of all there is to it. So it should be reasonably straightforward to mount either throwout bearing back on the transmission, and hopefully it will hold and not be a problem. So here's hoping. So anyway, alrighty, so other projects going on. As you can see, there's all 26 of the batteries that we had to pull out to get to the motor again, and the high voltage wiring shelf back there, all the various components that are necessary to put the engine compartment back together, remount the motor. Yeah, so while I'm waiting on the clutch disc to show up, I'm trying to finish up a few other small little things that are going on. One is, this is the proximity sensor for the RPM gauge that I got from EVTV, and it didn't come with any kind of reluctor ring. So I don't really have any specific way of mounting it or anything. This metal piece was actually from the net gain controls, or sorry, net gain warp speed sensor, and I used that to mount it in there. So that should actually mount on the motor. It goes right here on the tail shaft of the motor, and kind of like so, into those two bolts. But this needs a magnetic, or a ferrous metal, is what it says, in order to have it pick up the passage of something going by to cause a pulse. And what we've got here is a aluminum ring with some little magnets that kind of stick out here. That are the bolts that hold the ring onto the shaft. That's how the net gain, the warp speed sensor actually worked, is based on the magnets going by. I'm hoping that the magnets going by are also going to be considered ferrous metal and get picked up by this proximity sensor. It's kind of a long shot. I don't really know. I'm not a metallurgist, so as far as I'm concerned, one chunk of metal is the same as another chunk of metal. But I guess we're going to find out if that's going to work at all. And so I need to get that wired up to the soliton, so we'll have some RPM sensing. Right now I've just got the old original one kind of wedged in here. So this is the warp speed sensor, which was picking up a lot of noise, and I was getting spikes in the line and stuff, and it just wasn't really doing it. So we're gonna try to wire up that other one and hope for the best. Also, wiring wise, there's a whole lot of really long cables here. And before, when I originally put this together, they terminated very nicely. They kind of ended exactly where they needed to go up here, and then they were just kind of bundled up in the back. But when I put that mid battery box in, I ended up with specifically this one. This is that goes from the negative in the mid battery box all the way up to the front and goes to the positive in the front battery box, roughly here. And there's extra cable, so we've got a big wad of extra wire, which has been very difficult to work with. So I think I'm going to shorten those wires as much as possible and get them to the exact length necessary for the current configuration. And we're hoping that they're all going to reach and everything's going to work. So I'm going to be trying to do that while we're waiting on the clutch to show up from UPS. So that should be fun. Anyway, just wanted to give everyone an update of the current manic stress level going on here in Cortland, New York. So we'll be again shipping the car to Missouri on Friday. Oh yeah, just to add in a little extra pain and suffering for me, we're replacing the rear brakes, the calipers and rotors and pads, because when I had it down to the shop to get the new struts put on, I'm not sure if there's enough light in here, but so we got the shiny new shocks in the back and struts in the front to go with the new rotor and brake pads in the front. They mentioned that the back brakes were seized up and not working at all, and it was all a big problem, but they couldn't find any replacement parts. They weren't available, and I'm not really sure what the deal was. I mean, the car is an 87, so that might be part of it. But either way, I went down to the shop that I normally go to for these things, and they were able to order the parts and said they would be in today or tomorrow. And so tomorrow, first thing in the morning, this would be Thursday, I have to drive the car down to my regular shop and have them put the rear brake, both rear brakes on, the whole shebang. So at that point, my suspension system should be almost entirely brand new. My brakes are brand new, and tires are new. The rims are all cleaned up. So lots and lots of stuff has changed very recently, and just trying to get ready for the convention, eliminate any noise. There was a little bit of rubbing that I could hear in the rear brakes, which is why I brought it up originally, and so hopefully that'll improve the range if the brakes aren't rubbing. Seems like that'd be a good thing, and yeah, good times. So anyway, I will get back to y'all later when I've got something to report. Hopefully that clutch will show up and we can get things reassembled in a big hurry. So take care and have a nice day.